There was a man who had everything most people spend their entire lives chasing, yet what makes his story unforgettable is not what he had, but what he lost. He lived a life surrounded by blessings so complete that anyone who saw him would quietly wish to trade places with him, even for a single day. His home was filled with warmth, his heart with peace, and his life with a kind of ease that seemed almost untouched by hardship. This man was Prophet Ayyub, alayhi salam, a servant of Allah whose gratitude was as constant as his blessings and whose patience would soon become a lesson for all of humanity. Ayyub, alayhi salam, lived in a state of abundance that few could even imagine. His wealth flowed generously, his lands were fertile, and his livestock spread across vast fields like a sign of continuous prosperity. His body was strong, free from illness, and his days passed with comfort and stability. More than that, he was surrounded by a loving family, children who brought joy into his life, and a household filled with laughter and connection. People respected him, admired him, and saw in him the image of a man favored by Allah in every possible way. But what truly set Ayyub alayhi salam apart was not his wealth, nor his health, nor even his family. It was his heart, a heart that remained deeply connected to Allah despite all the comfort surrounding him. While others might forget their Creator in times of ease, Ayyub alayhi salam remembered. He was grateful in every moment, mindful in every blessing, and sincere in his worship. His life was not just full, it was balanced between dunya and faith, between what he had and the one who gave it. But have you ever wondered what happens when blessings are no longer there to support your faith? What happens when everything that makes life easy is suddenly taken away? Would gratitude remain, or would it slowly turn into complaint? This was the question that would soon define Ayyub alayhi salam's story, a question that would echo far beyond his time and reach into the hearts of those who hear it today. It is said that Shaitan, who constantly seeks to mislead and test the sincerity of believers, looked at Ayyub alayhi salam and saw something he could not accept, a man so devoted yet so blessed, a man so obedient yet so comfortable. Shaitan whispered a dangerous thought, that Ayyub alayhi salam's worship was not pure, that it was tied to his blessings, that if those blessings were removed, his patience would collapse and his gratitude would disappear. And so a challenge began to form, not because Ayyub alayhi salam had done anything wrong, but because his faith was about to be tested in a way that would reveal its true strength. And just like that, the life that once seemed unshakable stood on the edge of a trial no ordinary person could imagine. What was once a story of abundance was about to become a story of loss, pain, and something far greater than either of them. The first signs of the test did not arrive like a storm. There was no sudden collapse, no immediate devastation that shattered everything at once. Instead, it began quietly, almost subtly, as if life itself was slowly pulling away its comforts one by one. What was once stable started to weaken, and what once felt permanent began to slip through his hands. And in that slow unfolding, the test of Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam truly began. His wealth, which once flowed with ease, began to disappear. The lands that had always produced abundance no longer gave the same return. Crops failed, resources diminished, and the steady rhythm of prosperity turned into uncertainty. What had once been a symbol of blessing became a reminder of loss. But even as this happened, Ayyub alayhi salam did not panic. He did not question why things were changing. Instead, he remained calm, as if his heart understood something his eyes could not yet see. But the test did not stop there. Loss has a way of deepening, of reaching into places that hurt more than material things. And soon, the pain moved beyond wealth. His children, the very source of joy in his life, were taken away. One by one, the laughter that once filled his home turned into silence. The rooms that echoed with life now carried a heavy stillness. For any human being, this would have been unbearable. The loss of wealth can be rebuilt, but the loss of loved ones leaves a void that nothing in this world can truly replace. Yet even in that moment, Ayyub alayhi salam did not raise his voice in complaint. He did not cry out in protest. He did not ask, "Why me?" Instead, he absorbed the pain with a patience that seemed beyond human understanding. His heart remained anchored, not to what he had lost, but to the one who had given it in the first place. And that is what made his test different. It was not just about loss, it was about how he chose to carry it. There is a powerful contrast here that most people overlook. When life gives, people feel grateful, but when life takes, that gratitude is tested. Many can say Alhamdulillah in times of ease, but very few can say it when everything is being taken away. Ayyub alayhi salam stood in that rare place where gratitude did not depend on circumstances. His faith was not built on comfort, and so when comfort disappeared, his faith remained. As time passed, the weight of loss grew heavier. The world around him no longer looked the same. What once felt like a life of honor now felt like a life stripped down to its bare core. And yet, even in that emptiness, there was something that refused to break. His connection with Allah did not weaken. If anything, it became stronger, quieter, deeper. But a question begins to rise here, one that every listener must face. Was this a punishment, or was it something else entirely? Because when everything is taken away, the heart searches for answers. And for most people, that search leads to frustration, confusion, even anger. But Ayyub alayhi salam did not allow his heart to go down that path. He remained patient, not because the pain was small, but because his trust was greater than the pain itself. And just when it seemed like the test had already reached its limit, something even more difficult was about to begin. Because what comes next would not just test his patience externally, it would test him from within his own body. Just when it seemed that the weight of loss had already reached its limit, the test of Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam entered a stage far more difficult than anything before it. Until now, what had been taken from him existed outside of his body. Wealth, children, comfort, all of it had disappeared, yet he still stood with strength. But what happens when the test no longer surrounds you, but begins to live within you? What happens when your own body becomes the source of your pain? It was then that illness began to take hold of him. At first, it may not have been severe, but over time, it grew heavier, more intense, and more consuming. His once strong body, the same body that had carried him through years of ease, now began to weaken. Strength turned into weakness, and comfort turned into constant pain. Days became longer, nights became heavier, and there was no moment where the suffering truly left him. This was not a short test. It did not pass in days or weeks. It stretched over years. Imagine living every single day in a state of pain, where your body does not respond the way it used to, where even the simplest movements feel like a burden. For most people, even a small illness can bring frustration, complaints, and exhaustion. But Ayyub alayhi salam's condition was far beyond ordinary discomfort. It was a test that pushed the limits of human endurance. And as his condition worsened, something else began to change. The people around him, those who once respected him, slowly started to distance themselves. At first it may have been subtle, fewer visits, less interaction, quiet avoidance. But over time, that distance became clear. The man who was once surrounded by people now found himself alone. Society, which once admired him, no longer stood by his side. There is a deep contrast in this moment. A man who once had everything now had nothing. A man who was once honored now faced isolation. A man who once stood strong now struggled within his own body. This is the kind of test that does not just affect the outside world, it reaches deep into the heart, because loneliness carries a pain that is different from all other pain. And yet, even in this state, Ayyub, alayhi salam, did not break. One person remained by his side, his wife. While others walked away, she stayed. She supported him, cared for him, and stood beside him through every moment of difficulty. Her loyalty became a quiet source of strength, a reminder that even in the darkest tests, Allah leaves behind a form of mercy. But even with her presence, the reality of his condition remained heavy. Time passed slowly. Days turned into years, and the test did not ease. The pain did not disappear. The situation did not suddenly improve. For most people, this is the point where patience begins to crack, where questions start to form, where the heart begins to feel overwhelmed. But Ayyub, alayhi salam's patience was not ordinary. It was not dependent on time, nor was it weakened by prolonged suffering. He did not say, "This is too much." He did not say, "I cannot take this anymore." Instead, he remained silent in his pain, but deeply connected to Allah. His body may have been weak, but his faith was not. His condition may have worsened, but his trust did not fade. This is what made his story extraordinary. Not just that he was tested, but that he remained firm when most people would have fallen apart. And this raises a powerful question. How much can a human being endure before breaking? At what point does patience turn into despair? For most, that point comes quickly. But Ayyub, alayhi salam, stood far beyond that limit, holding on to something that could not be seen, yet could be felt in every moment of his silence. Because what was coming next would reveal the true depth of his patience, not just in what he endured, but in how he finally turned to Allah after all those years. Years passed, yet the condition of Prophet Ayyub, alayhi salam, did not change. The pain remained, the weakness continued, and the loneliness settled deeper into his life. For most people, time either heals or breaks them. But in his case, time became a witness to something far greater than endurance. It revealed a level of patience that was not built on circumstances, but on something far more powerful, a heart that refused to detach from Allah no matter how heavy the test became. There is something unusual about silence when it comes from strength. Many people remain silent because they have no choice. But Ayyub, alayhi salam, silence was different. It was not empty. It was filled with trust. He did not complain, not because the pain was small, but because his understanding of Allah was greater than his suffering. He knew that nothing happens without purpose, even when that purpose is hidden from human eyes. And so, instead of questioning, he remained patient. Think about the contrast in his situation. His body was in pain, yet his heart was at peace. His life was falling apart, yet his faith was rising. This is not something ordinary. Most people find it easy to worship when life is comfortable, when blessings are visible, and when everything is going well. But when those blessings disappear, faith is tested in its purest form. This is where many people struggle, because their connection to Allah is often tied to what they receive, not who Allah is. Ayyub, alayhi salam, showed a different reality. He did not worship Allah because of what he had. He worshipped Allah because of who Allah is. That is why his faith did not shake when everything around him collapsed. His patience was not passive, it was active. It was a conscious choice to trust, to remain firm, and to hold on to his connection with Allah even when there was no visible relief. There is also a deeper lesson hidden here. True patience is not just about enduring pain, it is about how you carry that pain. It is about controlling what the heart feels and what the tongue says. Many people can endure hardship physically, but their hearts fill with frustration, and their words reflect complaint. Ayyub, alayhi salam, however, controlled both. His heart remained clean, and his tongue remained silent from objection. But even the strongest hearts reach a moment where they turn to Allah in a deeper way. After years of suffering, years of silence, years of enduring pain without complaint, Ayyub, alayhi salam, made a dua, not out of frustration, not out of anger, but out of humility. And this is what makes that moment so powerful. Because when he finally spoke, his words were not filled with blame, they were filled with recognition. He did not say, "Why did this happen to me?" He did not demand relief. Instead, he acknowledged his condition in the most humble way possible. It was as if he was saying, "This pain has touched me, but I know you are still the most merciful." That balance between acknowledging hardship and recognizing Allah's mercy is something very few people can achieve. And this is where the story reaches a turning point, because sometimes it is not the length of patience that matters, but the sincerity behind it. Ayyub, alayhi salam's silence was not weakness, it was strength. His patience was not absence of pain, it was control over it. And his faith was not shaken by loss, but strengthened by it. What he said next, that simple yet powerful dua, would not only change his condition, but would become a timeless lesson for anyone who faces hardship. After years of silence, years of enduring pain without complaint, and years of holding his heart steady through every hardship, Prophet Ayyub, alayhi salam, finally turned to Allah with a dua. But this was not a desperate cry filled with frustration. It was not a demand for relief. It was something far more powerful, something that reflected the depth of his patience and the purity of his faith. He said in meaning, "Indeed, hardship has touched me, and you are the most merciful of those who show mercy." Look closely at these words. There is no anger in them, no objection, no questioning of why this happened. He simply acknowledged his condition. He admitted that he was in pain, but at the same time, he affirmed something even greater, the mercy of Allah. This is what made his dua extraordinary. It was not just about asking, it was about how he asked. There is a powerful contrast here. Most people, when they are tested, focus only on the hardship. Their words revolve around the pain, the difficulty, the injustice they feel they are facing. But Ayyub, alayhi salam, balanced both sides. He mentioned the pain, but he focused on Allah's mercy. This shows a heart that is deeply aware, a heart that does not lose sight of who Allah is, even in the darkest moments. And then something remarkable happened. Allah responded. The same Allah who allowed the test to continue for years now commanded relief. It is said that Ayyub, alayhi salam, was instructed to strike the ground, and from it water emerged, a water that was not ordinary, a water that carried healing. When he used it, his illness began to disappear. The pain that had lived in his body for so long started to fade. Strength returned. His body was restored. But the mercy of Allah did not stop there. What was taken from him was not only returned, it was multiplied. His wealth came back. His life was restored. And even his family, the love and connection he had lost, was given back to him in a way that reflected Allah's generosity. This was not just recovery, this was mercy beyond expectation. Think about the contrast. Years of darkness, followed by a moment of light. Years of pain, replaced by relief. Years of loss, followed by abundance. This is how Allah's mercy works. It does not just compensate, it elevates. And yet, the real lesson is not just in the ending, but in what led to it. Ayyub, alayhi salam, did not rush to make dua. He did not turn to Allah only when things became unbearable. He was already connected. His patience was already established. So when he finally spoke, his words carried sincerity, humility, and complete trust. There is something deeply important here. Dua is not just about asking for what you want. It is about how you see Allah when you ask. Do you see him as someone who is distant or as the most merciful? Ayyub, alayhi salam, saw Allah through the lens of mercy, even when he was surrounded by hardship. That is why his dua was accepted in such a powerful way. And this moment marks a shift, not just in his story, but in the message behind it. Because what happened to Ayyub, alayhi salam, was never just about him. It was about showing humanity what patience looks like, what true faith looks like, and how Allah responds to those who remain sincere through their trials. The darkness had lifted, the test had ended, but the question that remains is not about what Ayyub alayhi salam received after his patience. The real question is about what we learn from it. When you look at the story of Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam, it is easy to focus on what he lost and what he eventually regained. But the real meaning of his story is not in the loss, and it is not even in the restoration. It is the reason behind the test itself, because this was never about punishment. This was about elevation. Allah does not test his servants randomly. There is always wisdom, even when it is hidden. And in the case of Ayyub alayhi salam, his test was a way to raise his status to a level that could not be reached through ease alone. Comfort can make a person grateful, but hardship reveals the depth of that gratitude. It shows whether faith is real or conditional. Ayyub alayhi salam proved that his faith was not tied to what he had, but to who Allah is. This is where the story becomes personal, because if you are honest with yourself, you will realize how quickly patience disappears in your own life. A small inconvenience can disturb your peace. A single difficulty can make you question everything. You complain when things do not go your way. You feel frustrated when life becomes difficult. And yet, when you look at Ayyub alayhi salam, you see a man who lost everything, endured years of suffering, and still did not complain. There is a sharp contrast here. Your problems feel big because they are yours, but when placed next to his test, they begin to look different. This does not mean your pain is not real. It means your perspective needs to grow, because sometimes the weight of a problem is not in its size, but in how we choose to carry it. Ayyub alayhi salam carried his pain with patience. He did not allow it to turn into anger. He did not let it weaken his relationship with Allah. Instead, he allowed it to strengthen him. That is the difference between someone who breaks under pressure and someone who rises because of it. Another lesson here is that silence is not weakness. In today's world, people are encouraged to express every frustration, to speak every complaint, to react to every difficulty. But Ayyub alayhi salam teaches something different. He shows that strength can exist in silence, that sometimes the most powerful response is to remain patient and trust Allah without constant questioning. But this does not mean you never turn to Allah. Ayyub alayhi salam did make dua, and when he did, it was filled with humility and recognition of Allah's mercy. This balance is important. You are allowed to feel pain. You are allowed to ask for relief. But how you ask matters. Your heart should remain respectful, your words should remain sincere, and your trust should remain firm. There is also a deeper truth hidden in his story. Allah never abandoned Ayyub alayhi salam. Even when everything was taken from him, Allah was still there. The test itself was a sign of Allah's attention, not his absence. And this is something many people misunderstand. When hardship comes, they think Allah has left them. But in reality, sometimes hardship is a sign that Allah is shaping you, preparing you, and raising you. So the real question is not why Ayyub alayhi salam was tested. The real question is how you respond when your own test comes. Will you complain, or will you remain patient? Will you focus on what you lost, or will you remember who gave it to you? Will your faith weaken, or will it become stronger? Because tests are not just part of his story. They are part of yours too. And just like Ayyub alayhi salam, your response will define who you become.